Hello and welcome to episode 58 of the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. I'm Annabelle Bateman, and today on the show I'm talking with Dr. Eric Balcavage, and we are diving deep, and when I say deep, I mean deep, into the topic of cellular hypothyroidism. Now, this is something that you may not have heard of. It's only something I heard of just pretty recently, actually, in my conversation with Tara Nelson last year. So if you haven't checked out that episode, you might want to go check out that, all on thyroid basics. But the idea of cellular hypothyroidism is that you can have a cell that is hypothyroid, which is a little irrespective of whether or not you have Hashimoto's or thyroiditis. It's actually hypothyroidism on the cellular level. Well, my guest today, Dr. Eric Balcavage, is really an expert in this. He's got a book coming out too later on this year called The Thyroid Debacle, really diving into cellular hypothyroidism. So I wanted to get him onto the show to explain this. Now, I've been following Dr. Balcavage for quite some time on Instagram and watch a number of his videos that he puts out every Thursday. He also has a podcast called Thyroid Answers Podcast, and he is an expert in thyroid physiology, thyroid health, functional thyroid health. He's been working in this field for 28 years. He's a chiropractor, a functional medicine practitioner. He's studied under and consulted with people like, my favorite Dr. Karatsian and Dr. Ben Lynch. So if you're aware of methylation and maybe the book Dirty Genes, you'll be familiar with Dr. Ben Lynch. And Dr. Balcavage really, it's meaty. This conversation is meaty. And I say that because, not to put you off, I want you to have a listen, but to know that this may require listening to a couple of times. It certainly, I was really learning and digging deep into my own mind and processes as I was talking with Dr. Balcavage. If you want to see me in action, learning and pondering and trying to clarify, watch the YouTube video, because there's plenty of puzzled looks and deep thinking looks. Please do listen to it a couple of times. That's often how we learn and digest something new. So yeah, look, it's a fabulous conversation. We talk all about this idea of cellular hypothyroidism and the cell danger response and sort of stress on a cellular level, how that ties in with inflammation, how it's different to antibodies and the autoimmune aspect, and how they all interconnect. So I'm going to leave it there. The conversation actually starts mid-conversation, because as we were having a pre-chat before I really started the interview, there was so much gold in what Dr. Balcavage was saying. I'm just going to let it play. So you'll catch it mid-conversation, and then you'll hear about roughly about 10, 12 minutes in a proper welcome. So just go with that. I didn't want you to miss out on the beginning part of our conversation. The pre-conversation, because there was so much helpful information in that. Love to know what you think. Hi, and welcome to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast, where we discuss different aspects of living a healthy thyroid lifestyle, positively and practically, so that you can really thrive and not just survive. So join me, your host, Annabelle Bateman, and let's talk thyroid. I like to think I'm reasonably well-informed thyroid patient, but I'm not medical, and so some of the detail probably I need to hear a few times, but I like that, and I like that you're doing the more detailed stuff, because in the end, eventually you need more than the surface level stuff. So
absolutely.
So if I ask dumb questions, then that will be the
there's no dumb questions.
The simpler
because
questions.
Anytime that somebody has a question, you go, it definitely, for me, when somebody asks a question and it seems like it's a fairly simple question to me, because I'm always thinking, maybe I'm like, that's something that probably got missed, that person didn't get covered, right? We need to make sure we understand that. And if they didn't understand that level of a question, they're not going to understand the next level of understanding. So I think it's really important. But usually if somebody asks a question they think is silly, like this is dumb question, whatever, it's like, well, you're probably not the only person who doesn't know that answer. So it's better that we get that answer straightened out, and then we can move on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. And have you got any questions for me before we get going?
No, I read a little bit of the bio stuff. It sounds like you had a history of hypothyroidism and didn't get the results, which is the kind of normal, you know,
Yep.
that's the story, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hey, I did this, you know, I went, they said I was nuts, I'm crazy, I'm lazy, right? And then eventually I get diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and they said now those same symptoms are caused by hypothyroidism. They weren't before, but now they are. And we'll just give you T4 and it'll work and you'll be fine. And
Yeah.
it doesn't. And so then we'll give you a stronger dose, and that doesn't work. And now I've got, not only do I have hypothyroid symptoms, I'm still gaining weight. Now I have some hyperthyroid symptoms. Then you switch physicians and you go to an integrative physician. They say, hey, the solution is to give you T3 because you're a non-converter. That'll fix it. And for many people, that doesn't work. So they wind up on bigger doses of T4 and T3, and then they're just lost as to what to do. And then, you know, it's the rest of the rabbit hole. But it's so common. I mean, there's so many people are struggling. And I think across the board, I think allopathic is doing what it can do within its guidelines. And I would say the vast majority of the allopathic physicians really don't know anything beyond a TSH and free T4.
Yeah. Well, and a
Um,
lot don't want to know. Like, I've just found my mum was diagnosed last year, and she lives in a decent sized country town in, you know, a long way from where I live, but in New South Wales. And she's been looking for an integrative practitioner in her region, like prepared to drive, you know, an hour or more to, you know, just to find someone local. She can't find anyone. She's talked to doctors. She's asked, like, would you work with me? Would you learn with me? They've also basically said no. So she's had to go to Sydney, which is a 3.5 to 4 hour drive, to find a doctor that can help her manage her thyroid health. You know,
it's sad. I mean,
Yeah.
I have clients from Australia. Why are they coming to me? There's got to be people there. And they're like, there's nobody around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, and I don't mind working with them, but it would be easier all around if they had a local physician.
Yeah.
And really at some point, you got to have more people. I'm not saying I'm right in what I say, but I do believe strongly in a lot of what I say. I could be wrong about anything. Matter of fact, a lot of times we find out we're wrong 10 years from now. But in functional medicine, I'm often a tough against even the functional medicine crew, because we say things that we learn and we repeat them and they're not true. And then we act on those things and the patients don't get better. And then we wind up saying, well, then we got to give you this supplement, that supplement. Now they wind up doing the same thing that allopathic medicine does, just with vitamins. And we got a person on 20 supplements. They're still not well, but we think we're doing a better job because it's not a drug, it's a supplement. I think we as functional medicine people have to do a better job, and can't say, well, the only thing that's your issue is you're a non-converter, so you need T3. Well, the amount of people that have a genetic polymorphism of the deiodinase 2 enzyme is very small. So everybody can't be non-converters because of a genetic polymorphism. In my opinion, the vast majority of those people have some type of cell stress response going on, and the cells are not converting T4 to T3, not because they don't have a defective gene, but because there is appropriate adaptation of the cell to danger and saying, hey, slow down the metabolism.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely someone who tried
podcast.
T3 along the way, and it just didn't do enough good for me. So, you know, but I've spent a lot of time working on all of that, the cellular inflammation and liver support and my digestive health and those organs where that conversion takes place, to try to work. That's what I've tried to do, is to work on go back and like, well, why wouldn't I be converting, and working on some of those.
And
things.
I think that's the right strategy, right? Do the low hanging fruit stuff first. Like, let me clean up my diet, reduce the emotional stress,
Yeah.
respiratory stress, take care of my gut, eat healthy. Those are the low hanging fruit things that everybody should do. And those are the things that are essentially free, right? It's that next level of thing, like saying, okay, I've done all those things and I still can't lose weight. Do I have an immune that's become imbalanced or dysregulated over time? And how do I assess that? Well, there's tests to do that. Is there a potential organism that's potentially causing this? Well, I took care of my gut. Well, there's it could be oral bacteria. It could be Lyme. It could be an Epstein-Barr. It could be, so we have to take a look at those things. Could it be a toxin? It could be chemicals. Well, we're bombarded by toxins all the time. So what am I supposed to do? Well, you only need to really be overly focused on the ones your body has or your immune system has lost tolerance to. So let's look at those. Well, I've done detox. Well, this is beyond detox, because this is, you can't do, if you do a urinary test for chemicals, that just tells you you're exposed. That doesn't tell you that chemical is really a problem. It's just that you're exposed to it. And if your body's doing a good job, it's peeing it out. That's why it's in high levels in your pee and in your hair, because your body's getting rid of it. What we want to be concerned about, what our immune system has lost tolerance to, that would drive an excessive immune response that may also then result in immune and autoimmunity. That's the things that we need to take that deeper dive into. And that's really what we should be doing from a functional medicine standpoint as a practitioner. But the person who's a functional medicine coach or nutritionist, I mean, their focus is really on, I think where that middle ground is like, hey, all this other like food, diet, nutrition, sleep, exercise, mindset, I think that's great for the functional medicine coachy type person. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And they can take that so far, and they'll get a lot of people well. But when that stuff's not working, and I tried T4, that didn't work, and T3 didn't work, you got to go to that next level test. And that's where we should shine. As the practitioner, that's where we should be shining and doing something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as a patient, I'm a firm believer that we need a team. Like, we need a support team. And that might be a combination of the coach. You know, if you're needing help, well, how do you actually go gluten-free? Some people need really step-by-step a lot of support around that. And that's, so there's a place for that. But ultimately, I'm a firm believer we need an expert practitioner to work with long-term. And that maybe that changes a little bit over time, but it's helpful. Like, I've had the one doctor for 15 years. I think we've grown together, and she's been amazing, you know, but I've been lucky. Not everybody gets that. And even my diagnosis when I was 22, I was diagnosed straight away. I didn't have to go through, my TSH was 185 when I was diagnosed at 22. And that's, I don't know, 25 years ago.
Kind of a no-brainer diagnosis there,
so
right?
That's what I'm saying. So like, I think it had just sort of crept up. So I'm grateful too that I didn't have that 10 years of you're nuts, you know, you need to go on antidepressants, you're just, all of that. So yeah, but then we need, like, I love having people like, I would put people like you in my thyroid support team. So I'm a big one for that too. Like, when we can't get, well, you can't afford to see your practitioner all the time, monthly and so we need to be learning and getting information and trying to piece that together, but then in the framework of, the function, the functional practitioner. Do you see it a bit like a team like that?
Yeah, and like I think that's where you could make the process a little bit more cost effective for a person, right? Because I tell people all the time, this is not an inexpensive endeavor. It's usually an out-of-pocket expense. I'm not sure how it is there, but
it's the same here. It's similar but different. Yeah, still expensive.
But if you, like, as the physician, my time is this value, right? And so, sure, could I sit with you and tell you all the intricacies of how to do a gluten-free diet? I could. But to do that in an hour, I don't know that you want to pay me for an hour to do that, when you could pay somebody significantly less to do that. what you really want me to do is to take a look at your labs, your health history, your timeline, and be able to interpret the volume of your labs and say, hey, I see this here on your blood work. And you know what? Here's how that correlates to your signs and symptoms, and how this is how this correlates to your organic acid, and this is how it correlates to your lymphocyte map. So now we take this thing that looks like a normal value essentially on your blood work, and we take a look at everything else. You go, that's not a normal value. It's in the normal range, but it's inappropriate for you. And now what we need to do is find out why we have a normal value that's inappropriate for you. And we look at these other things and we understand why that value is artificially suppressed into normal range. And now we can help somebody whose labs potentially are told they're normal understand why they feel like crap, because they're artificially normal because of different mechanisms.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I think with the health coaching piece, I think, like, I've had a bunch of health coaches on my podcast. But I think that's really, they could really be that middle ground.
Yeah.
for physicians, right? Which is like, hey, let me do this high level stuff. You handle this more day-to-day stuff, and things should get better.
Yeah. And I mean, I would imagine that there's a place for that in a practice too. It probably already happens. I'm sure it does, where you've got the practitioner and the coach, and So, So, well, great.
All right. So let's get into it, because
I
think we're losing a lot of your good stuff. So
I think I'm just going to use this. I think I'm just going to use that, because that was all good stuff. So let's just get right into a little bit. Well, we've already done a bit, but tell us a little bit about who you are and who you work with, what you do, and how you got into working with thyroid health.
Sure. Yeah. I started off in college. I did no desire to be in medicine or chiropractic. Yeah, originally my background was a chiropractor, but I had no intention to be in medicine. But I was injured in a car accident and had to leave school for a while and did therapy and couldn't get myself straightened out. And I met this chiropractor in a bar when I transferred colleges, and he came up to me and said, hey, you got a rugby jacket on. Why don't you come play rugby for us? And I'm like, man, I can barely walk. And he asked me what I was doing. He said, yeah, I did physical therapy. I did all this stuff. He's like, well, why don't you come see me and I'll help you? And I said, who are you? He said, I'm Doc Jones. I'm the local chiropractor. And I'm like, oh, chiropractor. Because all I knew is what my parents had told me, is that chiropractors were witch doctors, and that I don't see one. So he made me a deal. If you come see me and I get you better, you got to play rugby for me. And if I can't get you better, you don't owe me anything. So I took him up on the deal. So long story short, 3 months later, I'm playing rugby and feeling great. So fast forward 4 years, because I'm doing healthcare-based stuff. And when I transferred, funny story was, the only thing, because I transferred mid-year, I couldn't get any business classes. So my advisor was like, we can't get you any classes. So you can't really start now. I'm like, what major does nobody take? And she said, medical technology. I'm like, perfect, sign me up. That's my new major. She's like, do you even know what it is? Nope, don't care. So, but the longer I was in that, I kind of got back into chemistry. And I was like, all right, this is cool. So I was gonna go to med school. My chiropractor says, why are you going to med school? You should go to chiropractic school. I'm like, why would I do that? So he went through my health history and said, hey, how's your sinus issues, your GI issues, all these things, ear issues, your back's better, but how's all these other health issues? And mysteriously, in the time I was seeing him over the last 3 years, getting adjusted probably every Friday before a game and every Monday after a game, my health got better overall. And he said, why do you think that is? And I said, clean living. And he's like, no. He said, you go to school full time, you work 40 hours a week, you play rugby and you drink like a fish and eat terrible. That's not clean living. So there's something else going on. Read these 4 or 5 books and don't come back and see me till you did it. So I read these books on the nervous system and chiropractic, and I was like, man, there's something about this. So I wound up going off to chiropractic school, came out of school, going to be a chiropractor and adjust the world, and that was going to be great. And then somewhere along the line, I got a message from my brother, and my brother was in the military, and he said, hey, his wife had been diagnosed with hypothyroidism, fibroids, and iron deficiency, and her doctor said, we're gonna give you a hysterectomy, put you on thyroid medications and iron, and you're gonna be good. Well, this is somebody in their 20s. And so maybe the uterus and ovaries are important in women. Who knows, right?
Especially in your 20s. Yeah.
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 So my brother said, hey, I'm like, so why are you telling me? He goes, because I need you to fix it. And I'm like, yo, I'm a chiropractor. There's no chiropractic adjustment for this. You know, I was philosophically based, but I'm like, this is not inside my wheelhouse. He's like, well, I know, but you're going to fix it. Which when your brother tells you, hey, you're going to do something, you try and figure out how to do it. So that got me back into functional medicine. As a medical technology major, I did a lot of blood chemistry in college and when I first started working. So I was looking at blood tests, doing all that stuff, and I enjoyed it. So now I was like, okay, I got to get back into blood chemistry, start looking at chemistry, trying to look at what was going on. That led me to functional medicine and a guy named Datis Karazian.
He's my hero.
So I'm going to all the Apex courses, doing all that stuff. As I started learning from Datis, I started realizing, okay, this is an autoimmune issue. It's Hashimoto's. I'm arguing with arguing with the physicians. They're like, nope, none of this is related. It's not autoimmune. But hey, you didn't even run the test to determine whether it's autoimmune. So long story short, we started working on it, got the situation under control, and changed the outcome of that. But as I'm working with my chiropractic patients and I'm talking to them about what I'm learning in functional medicine and I've been learning about thyroid physiology, I'm surprised. Everybody's on thyroid medication. I'm like, well, how do you feel? And they're like, I don't feel that good. I'm still overweight. I'm still tired. I'm still fatigued. I'm like, man, there's something else going on here. And at that point in time, I was really in the camp of Datis. You know, everything was, the immune system is attacking the thyroid gland for some reason. And that's the underlying issue. But at some point in time, I started questioning whether everything started at the thyroid gland. It didn't make sense to me that people were not being diagnosed for hypothyroidism, but having hypothyroid symptoms for sometimes years or decades before they ever got diagnosed with Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. So I said, there's something else going on, because these are all the signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism, but the thyroid physiology markers still are within range. So something else is going on. And one day, a friend of mine, Ben Lynch, I don't know if you've ever heard of Ben Lynch, he owns Seeking Health. And we were getting ready for ShyCon, which was the big conference. And he sent me a paper on the cell danger response from Dr. Robert Navio. Okay. And when I read that paper, it was thick reading, but I was like, the light bulb went off in my head that what these people, most people with thyroid symptomatology were struggling with wasn't an immune system that was just out of control, but these were people that were struggling with some type of cell danger response. And the change in their thyroid physiology, to a large part, was an adaptive change to help with that cell danger response. So for your listeners, they may say, well, what's the cell danger response? And how does that relate to thyroid physiology? Well, you're made of lots of cells, right? And so we're made of millions of cells, trillions of cells. And cells are like people. They operate in one of two fashions. If they're in a low stress state, cells are in manufacturing mode. They're making proteins and enzymes and hormones and skin and hair, cell membranes. They're making all kinds of stuff. So they have good, robust metabolism. They're making energy. And to do that, they need a lot of T3 inside the cell, binding to receptors, turning on the manufacturing process. At the same time, that T3 can bind to receptors that turn down or turn off this cell danger response, which is an innate protective response against danger. So essentially, it's the inflammatory response. Okay.
Yeah.
So a cell in danger wants to turn off the manufacturing process and turn on the protective mechanisms. And to do that, those cells need a low T3 state inside the cell. Okay, because T3, when it binds to certain receptors in the cell, it turns on manufacturing. And when I have a low T3 state, it turns off manufacturing. So then that's why you're tired. That's why you don't have your hormones. That's why you don't have healthy skin. That's why you don't have a healthy hair, because there's not enough T3 turning on manufacturing. Okay. And when you have a low T3 state, T3 comes off the receptors that was keeping the immune system turned off. And now when I have that low T3 state, the switches to run that cell danger inflammatory response are now turned on. Okay.
Yeah.
So a low T3 state in a cell can be because the gland doesn't make enough. But for the person who's developing hypothyroid signs and symptoms in the gland, there's still T4 and T3 in the bloodstream. Something else is going on, and it's the cell self-regulating. All cells in the body have the ability to self-regulate away from what's being produced. The thyroid gland makes T4 and T3. It's in circulation, but each individual tissue and the cells within that tissue can decide, do I want to increase my metabolism or decrease my metabolism, independent of what the thyroid gland is doing. Okay.
Yeah. And so that cell is that's the self-protection. So I actually don't need any more energizing, any more activity. I'm trying to protect myself.
Right. So think about it like this. If a bacteria or virus got inside the cell, okay?
Yep.
If I keep normal metabolism going, I'm going to bring glucose in. Who's using the glucose?
Yeah, the virus.
Bacteria, virus now has more fuel, right?
Yeah.
If I take amino acids and make those into protein and building blocks for the cell to make stuff, guess who else gets access to those polymers? The bacteria, the virus. Okay.
Yep.
And so what a cell does is when it senses danger, it walls off, it stiffens the cell membrane. That creates a low oxygen state inside the cell. It deactivates the T4 or the T4 that's coming into the cell into T3. So that becomes less, and less T4 comes into the cell and more T4 gets deactivated to reverse T3. Unfortunately, that causes you to be hypothyroid or have hypothyroid symptoms. And we think that the system is broken, but the system isn't broken. The system is saying, hey, I've got a threat here. I've got a toxin. I've got an organism. I've got a low oxygen state. Slow the metabolism down. Stop making stuff that could help that threat thrive. And let's take that energy and ramp up the cell defense. We're going to make we're going to make inflammatory molecules. We're going to send signals out to all the surrounding cells to say, hey, there's a problem. That's your inflammation. We're going to start autophagy, which is self-eating within the cell, to start cleaning up all the debris, looking for what that thing is. And once we find it, we're going to shuttle that out to into the bloodstream to say to the immune system, hey, here's this piece of particle, this piece of this organism. This is the thing causing the problem. Make some antibodies to this thing and go find it and kill it. Okay.
Yep.
So if this happens short term, it's one tissue, little tissue, it's not a big deal. Maybe a little fatigue, maybe something doesn't work as good. Short term goes away.
Yeah.
The issue becomes when there's chronic cell stress, and now more and more tissues become involved. That just shutting down metabolism is an energy dependent process. Okay. So now I've got tissues. I'm insulin resistant. How can I be insulin resistant? Well, you need T3 to get glucose into a cell. So all the glucose transporters require T3. So if I have a low T3 state, I don't bring as much glucose in. Now my body's making more insulin to try and force it into places. How did I get insulin resistant? Because I have a low T3 state. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but as that continues, that cell danger response continues, what happens is pieces of the organism or pieces of the cell that are being damaged, these are things we call DAMPs, damage-associated molecular proteins, and PAMPs, pathogen-associated molecular proteins. These are the things that tell the immune system, hey, this is the tissue being damaged, come help clean it up. This is the organism that's caused a problem, come find it and get rid of it. But those PAMPs and DAMPs are in circulation, and they can actually bind to receptors on a gland called your thyroid gland. And when those PAMPs and DAMPs bind to the receptors on your thyroid gland, the thyroid cells actually initiate like a self-destruct mode.
Right. So that's when you start to get damage to the thyroid gland itself.
Right. Without even, at the start, it's not even the immune cells causing the damage. The particle binds to the thyroid cell, the cell goes, whoa, danger, and that causes disruption. And those thyroid cells actually act like immune cells causing damage. And you would say, well, why would the body do that? It doesn't sound like it makes sense. Because the other thing that that damaged cell does is it releases signaling molecules, inflammatory chemicals, into the bloodstream that attracts the white blood cells to the thyroid gland, which then causes the thyroiditis, more destruction.
Okay. Yep.
So why would the body do that? Why? It doesn't make sense, right? Why would the body do it? Well, if I'm one cell and I need to slow down the metabolism of one cell, I can deactivate thyroid hormone locally. But if this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue globally, and I need to down-regulate metabolism, wouldn't it be better to go turn off the switch?
So then they all kind of get together and...
So now, yeah, those things bind to the thyroid, stimulates that thyroiditis. The immune cells come in, start causing more damage to the tissue. And now we have thyroiditis. Then you have the episodes of hyper, hypo, and eventually hypo. Now, there is a discussion about antibodies. Well, what about TPO antibodies? Don't the TPO and don't thyroglobulin and TPO antibodies just, they're like little Pac-Man gobbling up the thyroid gland? No, that's not true. So the thyroglobulin antibodies don't cause any damage to the thyroid gland based on the literature. And the TPO antibodies cause very little damage to the thyroid gland itself. There's some, but not much. I think one of the papers I read said less than 5% or 10% of the damage to the thyroid gland is actually done by the TPO antibodies.
So then what can I just maybe take it back a step?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to
I warned you I could get carried away a little bit, right?
That's all right. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. And if I'm understanding it, then hopefully, other people will understand it. So on that cellular level, where, the cells are in that cell danger response, they're protecting themselves, and then they're coming to the thyroid gland.
The cells in cell danger aren't.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm a liver cell. I'm perceiving danger. So what I do is I release signaling molecules, inflammatory chemicals to go out into the bloodstream and tell the immune system, hey, I'm in trouble, come help me. That's when inflammatory chemicals are signaling molecules, right, to the immune system. Those inflammatory chemicals also tell the surrounding cells, hey, there's damage. It'd be like you. If somebody was breaking into your house, you might want to call the police, right, to say, hey, somebody's breaking into my house. That's what a cell in danger is going to do. It's going to send signaling chemicals out. You might also start to call your friends and say, hey, there's a pack of kids breaking into houses, lock up your house, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the cell that's damaged is doing, that's in danger.
Yeah.
As it's trying to help itself, there's particulates that it can send out, which are pieces of the organism or pieces of itself. And those little particles float around, and then a white blood cell finds that piece of liver tissue, and it can say, hey, the liver's being damaged, we got to go to the liver. If it binds to the thyroid gland, though, that can be a thing that initiates the thyroiditis at the thyroid gland.
Okay. I think what I'm trying to work out is the connection or not. Maybe there's not a connection then between the autoimmunity. So when you're talking about then the antibodies, like I'm trying to work out, so from a Hashimoto's point of view, like how does it all connect or not, or how is it different?
So this is a really good question. What's the difference between just thyroiditis, which is the inflammation of the thyroid gland by these white blood cells coming, right? Yep. T cells, B cells, versus Hashimoto's? What's the difference? The only real difference is we diagnose Hashimoto's once you have the antibodies, TPO antibodies. We got Hashimoto's, right? As soon as I see antibodies, now you have Hashimoto's. No antibodies, thyroiditis.
Okay.
So there's Hashimoto's thyroiditis,
yep,
which is inflammation with antibodies, and there's just good old-fashioned thyroiditis with inflammation, no antibodies.
Yep. Okay.
But here's what I want you to consider. Everybody probably has Hashimoto's. It's the state of their immune system that may determine whether they make antibodies or they don't make antibodies. Okay. So there's papers out there that say every Hashimoto case starts as a Th1 driven disorder. Okay. So you have T cells that initially get activated. T cells don't make antibodies. So initially the T cell system is upregulated. That's a less specific, right? There's inflammatory T cells are going to go in there. They can create some damage, create some inflammation, but they don't make antibodies. In time, those T cells take pieces of broken up thyroid gland and present those to the B cells, which now produce antibodies. But what we know from lymphocyte panels is that some people are just stuck in a T1 pattern and they have very low B cells. So that person may have chronic thyroiditis, but can't even make B cells. They don't have enough B cells to make a lot of antibodies. And this happens all the time in clinical practice. Somebody comes in, they have thyroiditis, but it's not Hashimoto's thyroiditis. You start working with them, they're losing weight, they're feeling better, everything's better. Now all of a sudden their antibodies are positive. Now I have Hashimoto's, I'm worse. No, you're not worse. You always had thyroiditis, but now your immune system is more balanced. The T dominant disorder is now balanced, and now we're starting to see the antibodies. They're not worse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So now, if it went from like no antibodies to, hey, I got 7,000 antibodies, maybe there's something different, but you'll see that subtle shift from, hey, I was always less than 34 and now I'm 350. Probably that balance factor. Okay.
Yeah. And
does that make sense?
I think so. And so, yeah, I think it does. This, so you're saying with the Th1 dominance is maybe not, the body's not even able to make the antibodies because that's still too dominant. When that's damped down or settled down, then that brings the immune response maybe back into a bit more balance, and that actually will produce the antibodies.
Right. So B cells are making the antibodies.
Yeah.
T cells don't make antibodies. So initially, in the initial phase, think about this from an immune response. Initially, when there's an immune attack or a problem, I send out my neutrophils and my monocytes. Those are like my first wave of defense. And those cells try and get everything under control. It's bacteria, virus, we got it, we handle it, no problem, everything goes away. But if they get there and they're like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. This is like the police force. They're like, hey, we need the National Guard, right? So now they're taking material back to the T cells, the National Guard, to say, hey, you guys got to come out and help us. And the T cells are going to go out. They don't know exactly what they're going for yet, but they're coming out to help. Once the T cells get out there, then they're bringing particulate matter back and presenting it to your B cells. And the B cells are like the special forces that are saying, all right, we're going to make antibodies to we have the thyroid gland being damaged. We got to make some antibodies and we got to go clean that up. We got damage here. We got to go clean that up. So there's specific antibodies to help clean up some of the debris. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, could you have antibodies that are directly attacking the tissue? You could. And that's, I think, too heavy of a conversation to get in here.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, based on, a few years, I've only been doing this like 28 years or so. So, but if it was just an immune system out of control, right? It's just eating away the thyroid gland. You have no hope. But if it's more a part of a protective response against a threat, then if you change your diet, if you improve your lifestyle and you reduce the bacterial load and you fix your gut and you get appropriate sleep and you breathe well and you reduce the stress on the physiology, what I've seen in 28 years is thyroid antibody production goes down.
Yeah.
What I see is that T4 to T3 conversion starts to work again. What I see is thyroid glands actually starting to recover and people needing less and less medication and many going off of it. So if it's just an immune system out of control, totally lost it, how are these people, how do they get better?
Yeah.
Is that, you know where I'm going?
Yeah, no, I totally, that makes total sense. And that fits with, well, it certainly fits with my experience too, of just when you deal with the root cause, that's kind of what you're saying, isn't it? When you go back, underlying, what's actually causing the body, the cells, the stress in the first place. Can you reduce that, remove that? I know that's oversimplified what you've said, but when you can go back to those basics, that's going to mop up a lot of the over, I guess my experience is it's over a really long period of time.
And it can be.
And it can be
right?
many years. And I see it all, it's just part of a lifestyle, and there'll be sort of ups and downs depending on what gets thrown, my way.
We all have, stress is not a bad thing. Yeah. Right. We all have a tolerance for stress. But the problem with it is that we get to our threshold of stress and we stay at threshold or over threshold, at threshold or just below it. We don't allow our body to come back to basics. So a couple analogies I use to kind of help your listeners. If I came to your house, you're a mom, right? It's holidays, Christmas is coming up. You're cooking a big meal, you got all the burners on, you're cooking all the food, right? You're trying to clean the house, trying to do wash, right? You're doing like a typical mom, you're doing like 20 things all at the same time. One of your boys is sitting at the kitchen counter. Somebody breaks in the house, starts attacking your child. What are you going to do? You're going to you're going to continue to cook?
Yeah, no.
Right?
Depends which child it is, no. No.
Yeah, it depends which one and what day it is, right? But you're not taking time to turn off the burners, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to pack everything up in nice glass Tupperware, right? You're not going to go take a quick nap. You're not going to try and throw a load of wash in or just vacuum the floor real quick while this person's attacking your child, right?
Yeah.
So if I walked in your house and I don't see you fighting off the attacker because you're in another room, but I see the vacuum's running, there's wash all over the place, the house is a disaster, food's burning, should I assume that you're just terrible housekeeper, terrible cook, and you don't know what the hell you're doing? Or should I ask a better question?
Yeah.
Maybe Annabelle isn't doing the wrong thing, even though this all looks wrong. Maybe none of this is important at this moment. There's something else that's more important that she's putting her time and attention and energy towards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
So when I look at the cells and the way they behave, and I look at the immune system, I don't initially assume that the body's broken. I always assume it's adapting to something that's more significant or more important than making your sex hormones right now.
Yeah. And so what is that? So that's that asking the better questions. Yeah.
Right. And so how do we figure that out? That's where everybody's like, well, just tell me how to fix it, right?
There's
The
no
issue
simple
is,
answers to that though, is there?
it isn't. And the one thing you said that's really important for people to hear again is that it usually isn't the last thing that happened to you before you got diagnosed. One of the most important things a client can do for me, for you, for themselves is to write out their story, to write out their health timeline from start as early as you can remember all the way through. And when they do that, the big picture, I mean, it really becomes easy to start to see the picture. Because you can see stressor, 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 broken, right? And all these, but it was just a hormone issue. No, that is a sign of a problem, right? I just had a gut issue, but it was just irritable bowel. That's a functional problem, right? And so the other analogy I wanted to share with you is I try and get people to understand, because they say, well, I went gluten-free and it didn't work. Okay. So let's pretend like your life is like, I have 2 cinder blocks and a board going across, right? And now all the stressors of your life are like 5-pound weights. And I start stacking 5-pound weights on that board, right? Let's say I get to 100 pounds. I put the last 5 pounds on there and the board breaks. Which 5-pound weight broke the board?
Yeah.
Well, somebody might say, well, obviously it was the last one, gluten, right? Because that was the last thing I did before the board broke. So it must have been that. Great. If I said to you, listen, Annabelle, pick up that last 5-pound that you put on there and take it away. Is the board fixed?
Yeah. No.
It's still broken.
Yeah.
And if I said to you, how are you going to fix it? You'd say, well, I have to take all the weight off. I've got to take all 100 pounds off. Then I have to pick it up and I got to rebuild it. Right? I got to put the 2 boards together, get another board, screw it in there, I got to reinforce it. And then I can start stacking weights on it. And guess what? Because I reinforced it, it actually might be better and stronger than it was before. So for us, it's the same thing. We have stress and it accumulates and stress and accumulates and stress and accumulates. And we get to that threshold and now our cells are in danger mode. Because we live in a life that we're bombarded by stress, and we often don't calm ourselves down. Nobody wants to do medication and hum and all that meditation. Nobody wants to do that stuff. Nobody wants to do breathing exercises. Nobody wants to take their nose. Nobody wants to do any of that stuff. We just want to have fun. And so everything accumulates. We stay in this world of this excessive stress state. Sometimes we're in, we're out, we're in, we're out, but we're staying up there. We're never getting back to threshold. And so we assume it's the last thing, but it's often, when I go back, I always say, like, I think there was a famous philosopher, I think his name was Donkey, and he's walking through the field with Shrek. And he says, ogres are like onions. You have to peel back the layers. Health problems are like onions. You got to peel back the layers. We see the thyroid issue and we want to jump to it as the problem instead of saying, but why did it become that way? I just finished a consult with a person and they said, well, my doctor said that the reason I have all my health problems is because I'm a diabetic. I'm like, well, how did you become a diabetic? Well, they didn't explain that. I said, well, you also have fatty liver. Why? Yeah, they told me one of the reasons why I'm so sick is because I have fatty liver. I'm like, well, something had to go wrong to develop insulin resistance. Something had to go wrong to develop fatty liver. I said, do you have a terrible diet? And he told me it was that. I'm like, did you tell them that's your diet? And he said, yeah, but they don't believe me. But that's the issue. You have to ask better questions. So for the people who are your client or struggling with hypothyroidism, think about your story, and everything matters prior to the diagnosis. Everything, how birth, delivery, antibiotics, stressors, strains, trauma. And there's a story there, and a good functional practitioner or coach is going to look at that health line, that health timeline, and say, hey, this isn't a 6-month issue. This is a 10-year issue or a 20-year issue or a 30-year issue. And we got to go back here and we've got to start working our way through the process. And people often think that they have a thyroid disorder, a gut issue, a adrenal issue, a skin issue. And what I want people to take away from this conversation is they have a excessive cell stress response and an adaptive physiology. And when you take energy away from normal physiology, downregulate the energy production, tissue hypothyroidism, increased inflammation, and you're making less energy for the gut, you're going to have a gut problem. You're going to have a hormone problem. You're going to have an adrenal problem. You're going to have a sleep problem. I call that a multi-system adaptive disorder. And so instead of thinking like I have 10 problems that are all unrelated, you should expect that they're all related.
Yeah.
And where you have the biggest issues is probably where you have most or a higher level of tissue hypothyroidism going on, a higher level inflammatory process going on. It doesn't happen evenly throughout the whole body. And some people are like, well, I don't have that, so I may not, I don't have hypothyroidism because I don't have that. No, you can still have hypothyroidism. It's just not affecting those tissues yet.
I think that's really helpful. And I think it's hopeful. And like you said, a few minutes ago, is that we all need hope, don't we? When we've got a chronic health issue, we need hope. And it's a lot of what I want to put forward in all of what I do is to give people hope, because I think that's critical. And there's no quick fix, but it's hopeful. When you can, like you say, when you can peel back the onion layers, when you take the time to look back, reflect on your story. One of the things I do on the show is just bring people on to talk about their stories and just share their stories, and probably not to that same, I think there's a power in writing it out. And I found when I have written out my story, incredibly powerful, and you see things. And then the more you listen to people like you, or, like I've done some of Dr. Karatsian's courses, like the more you listen, you think, I hadn't thought about that being connected. And like I've had a demyelinating lesion, and like I somehow still thought about that as separate, but now I see that as it's all part of the same thing. And so it's just those layers. But there's so much, I see it, once you've got your head around the fact that you're dealing with a complex body and system and life, that it is hopeful, that there is so much that we can do, that we can understand, but it just takes time, and that's okay.
And I think it's helpful when you know that this is an adaptive response. At time, if you have a long-term adaptive response, stuff does become dysfunctional and broken, right? It does develop into disease. But if you look at it like too many people, especially those who have autoimmunity, say, why is my body attacking me? Like, why is it doing this to me? Versus I like the better way, just reframe it. What's my body trying to protect me from? Right. And that's hopeful.
Yeah.
And if the thought process is somebody's telling you, listen, you have an autoimmune disorder, there's nothing you can do about it, it's going to continue to destroy your thyroid gland, there's nothing you can do, man, that's an awful place to be.
Yeah.
Especially when we know if you don't address the initial triggers that cause your first autoimmune condition, there's a high probability you're going to have a second and a third and a fourth. And that's devastating for people. And so I had Hashimoto's, how could I get it, right? I'm helping everybody else.
Yeah, right.
And one day, I'm in my 40s, I'm doing triathlons, and I think I'm doing all the healthy stuff, right? I eat right, I work, I coach, and triathlon training, sleeps for wussies. But one day I do my blood work and I'm insulin resistant, thyroid antibodies positive, I got liver enzymes. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? But I had to take an honest look at my life, and I'm like, listen, I'm only sleeping about 4 hours a night. My nose has been broken so many times. I have a deep, crushed airway that at some point I'll get fixed. But if you don't sleep much, if you don't breathe well, and you've got, working, business, coaching, all, family life stress, kids, all those things, day in, day out, it was breaking me down. And you could say, well, you were exercising. No, right, but exercise without recovery is not good. And so it wasn't about the stress, because I could do the same stress now. As long as I allow for more recovery, I'm fine. But at that point in time, it was go, 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 go. And if you looked at me from the outside, you'd say, you're physically fit, you're healthy, you're doing endurance sports, you eat good, you're doing all the right things. But I was missing two of the most important things: sleep for recovery and proper breathing. And when you don't do those two things right, and you're doing everything else like hard, even healthy things can become part of the stress response. And, what do? How did I fix me? That, how did you fix you? I do the same things I do for everybody else. I improve my sleep, right? I tape my nose, tape my mouth so I can improve my breathing, do breathing exercise to restore. Even though I got a deviated septum and poor airway, I still improve my breathing pattern. I changed the way I run and the pace and rebuilt my oxygen capacity. Instead of getting 4 hours a night, I dedicated myself to getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Worked on my gut, because even though athletes look healthy, a lot of time that overtraining and lack of sleep dysregulates the gut. So, I did all the same things I do to my clients. And guess what? Insulin resistance goes away. Thyroid antibodies go away. All thyroid markers go back to normal. Liver enzymes go back to normal. But if I had the mentality that it was doom, there's nothing you could do, I probably wouldn't be here having that conversation, right?
Yeah. Look, I think I've got a gazillion other questions, but I think that's a good way to wrap it up. I think what I would like to say to people who are listening is go check out Eric's podcast, Instagram. Like, you do Thyroid Thursday videos, like 10-minute videos on a Thursday that are released on Instagram. You've got the podcast is called Thyroid Answers Podcast. And I think this is the sort of information that you share, Eric, that you're not just going to get it in one go. Like, it does take time and listening. And what I've found over time, and I'm constantly learning all the time. Like, I've learned stuff in this conversation. The thing that I like about doing the podcast is I get to re-listen to it when I'm editing it. That's when I actually start to really hear it, and re-listen. And like, so if you're listening and this is all a bit like, oh, well, this is a bit new or different or more detail than you used to, just listen to either this over and over, or just go check out Eric's other work and listen. By the time you listen or read, multiple, 10, 20 different podcasts, you start to pick out common themes, and then you start to get it. That's what I find. So are they the best places for people to connect with you?
Yeah, those are the best places, right? Yeah, you have my website stuff, but usually
I'll pop all that in. Yeah.
Instagram is where I put stuff on my YouTube channel. I put stuff, so the podcast is there in the Instagram. I will have a book coming out sometime in the spring.
Woohoo!
So that's with the publisher. So we're still waiting on information on that, but that'll be called The Thyroid Debacle. So there's a link on my website. If someone wants to be in tune with what's going on and how soon, they can go to my website and get that. But what I said was definitely, we talked about this at the beginning. I thought I wouldn't get deep. I did. I apologize, but
no, it's good.
It's the same thing when I read a paper, right? I read a paper and I got to internalize it, go through it, repeat it. Let me see how that makes sense. And I'll listen to the same thing. We're always learning. Yeah. I learn from patients. I learn from people I talk to, and on the podcast, I think, oh, how does that relate? But you're not going to get this physiology thing in just tell me the two things I need to do to fix it. That never works. No. And your better option is to start to understand the potential mechanisms of how you got sick, so that you can reverse engineer it and help yourself get better. So that way, next time you start to have issues, you start to go, okay, let me take in my life and my lifestyle and my diet, my nutrition. What can I do here to get myself back? What have I let go? What have I doing less of that I need to be doing more of or doing better? And you may wind up just taking care of yourself and not necessarily needing that functional medicine practitioner right away, because you've already learned the basic principles. So that's what I really try and do with my patients. I try and teach them as I'm helping them, so that they understand the principles. When you see this is what it should tell you. And I may tell them 5 or 10 times, but by the end, my patients are going, okay, this is this is that, and this is this. And especially my patients that listen to my podcast, and they're already telling me, okay, I got this part, I got that part.
Yeah.
Now what? How's that tie in? And that's really what we want. Doctor means teacher. So I want to leave my relationships with people so that they gained more knowledge and they're more in tune with what's going on than when I met them.
Yeah. Well, that is a good doctor, teacher. Yeah. And thank you for all of that, what you do teach, and you give so much to the thyroid community broadly. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. I would love it if you enjoyed it, if you would hit subscribe and the bell. That would be really helpful. Even more helpful, actually, would be to share it with someone else who you know has thyroid issues or you think would benefit from listening. That really is part of my mission, I suppose, is to spread the message of positive and practical approach to managing your thyroid health so that people really kind of have more energy to get on with living their life and not just kind of trudging through each day. So spreading that word really genuinely helps other people feel better, live better, be better. The best way that you can connect with me is through my website, which is annabellebateman.com. From there, really, you'll be able to connect in all the other ways. I would love it if you would join my Facebook community group. There's lots of great support there. It's all free. That's just being with like-minded people. But from the website, you can also book a strategy session with me. So if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, not too sure where to start, then book a strategy session. There's also freebies to download and links to look at my online courses or purchase some essential oils or my cookbook. So that's really the hub, would be annabellebateman.com. But look forward to connecting with you and just being in this thyroid health journey together. Have a great day. Bye.
The information presented and discussed in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease and should not be used as a substitute for proper advice from a qualified professional.